In recent years, awareness of dog stress signals has exploded, but there's a downside. The danger of overanalyzing and causing unnecessary stress and worry for you and your dog. And here's something else to think about. Is stress always bad? In my next video, I look at how a little bit of stress can actually be really good for your dog. So stick around for that. But first, let's take a look at context and how important it is in analyzing dog body language. Not long ago, people didn't even know what whale eye or calming signals meant. Thanks to the magic of social media, these terms are now quite commonplace amongst dog owners. The more we learn about our dogs, the better, but there is a downside to analyzing these stress signals. We've tended to simplify dog behavior into a checklist of sorts. The dog yawns, stressed. The dog licks his lips, stressed. We've forgotten how important it is to look at these stress signals in context. Dogs also don't communicate in little tiny signals. They communicate as a whole, and that means if we look out for clusters of stress signals, we're going to be much better suited to really knowing whether our dog is actually stressed or not. So what happens when we overanalyze and assume that a dog is stressed because they blinked 3 times instead of 2? Well, first of all, it creates unnecessary anxiety. You're going to be freaked out because you think your dog is stressed, and because you're freaked out, the dog is actually going to be stressed. So it's quite literally making a mountain out of a molehill. Can you imagine how anxious you would be if you just randomly scratched your nose and somebody jumped and went, "Are you okay? Are you all right?" Secondly, it can lead to accidental reinforcement of behaviors. If your dog yawns one day and suddenly you jump to attention, that's not been lost on the dog, and the dog very quickly learns that he's pretty much got the dog equivalent of a butler bell. As soon as he wants some attention, all he has to do is yawn. You think the dog is stressed, you leap into action. Dog thinks he's got this all sorted. So we might start seeing stress signals when the dog is not even stressed. The dog is just doing it because it's been associated with extra attention. And thirdly, it disrupts natural communication. Dogs need to be dogs. If we are jumping in and micromanaging every little signal that we see that we think is a stress signal, we're actually causing problems for the dogs, and we are, by and large, inhibiting their own ability to self-regulate. Let's go through some of the most commonly misinterpreted stress signals and when they really matter. Yawning isn't always stress. Sometimes it is boredom, sometimes it's because the dog is tired, or sometimes the dog is mirroring us. The context in which the yawn occurs matters the most. In this video, the dog gives more than one stress signal. There's lip licking and there's yawning, and both of them are out of context, so it's pretty safe to assume that the dog is stressed or uncomfortable. There we see the lip licking, and there's the yawn. In this video, the yawn is not a stress signal as it's performed in isolation, and the dog resumes exactly the same behavior after the yawn. Lip licking. If food is involved or food was recently involved, it's more than likely just normal physiological lip licking. If the situation is tense, then yes, then it's probably a stress signal. In this video, you'll see a multitude of stress signals coming from the dog. In some cases, the lip licking can actually be directed at the object of the distress. Here we see the ears are pinned back. We see whale eye. There's the whale eye. And now we see the lip licking starts, and some of the licking is directed at the toddler. Compare that to this example of lip licking, which involves a food item, and the difference is quite clear. The lip licking is in isolation, and if you look at the context, it's pretty obvious that the dog is licking their lips because of the stimulus of food. Sudden mouth closure. This is the one that is the most likely to actually be a stress signal or an indicator of a potentially stressful situation occurring for the dog. This is the stress signal that occurs when the dog is trying to make their mind up about something. Does that mean a closed mouth always is indicative of a stressful situation for a dog? No. Sometimes dogs just have their mouths closed. What you want to look out for with this particular stress signal was that the dog was panting rhythmically and normally, and suddenly the mouth closed. So again, the context in which it occurs is critically important to understanding whether it's actually an indicator of stress or not. This is a great example of what could possibly be a stress signal. But you'll see that after the pause, the dog goes back to what it was doing. So it's safe to assume that whatever it was that it saw that piqued its interest was not enough to stress the dog out. The shake-off is the most commonly overanalyzed stress signal. If a dog receives a tactile stimulus to the back or even the head and neck, the reflexive response is to shake. In this type of situation, a shake-off is no more indicative of the dog's state of mind than a sneeze if I were to get a whiff of pepper. It's a reflex action. However, if we zoom out and look at context, so in other words, there's no tactile stimulation to the back, neck, or head, there's the presence of potential stresses, which could be the young boys in this case, and unusual behavior, which I would consider this to be because the dog was not engaging in any behavior that would normally lead to a shake, then yes, it's probably a stress signal. So how do we read stress signals properly? There's 4 considerations. Number 1, look at the whole dog, not just that one little signal. Dogs will often cluster these signals, and when you see a cluster of signals, you can be more confident in assessing the situation that the dog is stressed than if you just see one signal in isolation. Number 2, consider the environment. What is happening around the dog? Is there anything happening that could possibly elicit stress or anxiety in the dog? If not, then it's more than likely that the dog was just licking his lips or yawning or shaking off. There's not necessarily a stress response going on. It was just normal dog behavior in that particular moment. Consider the dog's behavior immediately after this signal that has maybe made you wonder if the dog is stressed. If they resumed their normal activity, then it probably wasn't a stress signal. It was just some normal behavior that the dog was performing. And compare this to their usual behavior. Dogs are all individuals. Some of them, just like humans, are a little bit quirky. They might have some idiosyncrasies that are actually completely normal for them. They may not be normal for another dog and perhaps could indicate some kind of discomfort in that dog. But get to know your dog. Get to know what your dog's normal is, and that will help you to determine whether your dog is actually stressed or not. When we look at the big picture, that's when we understand our dogs better, and that's all that truly matters. And here's something else to think about. Is stress always bad for your dog? In my next video, I'm going to be exploring how a little bit of stress can actually be really beneficial for your dog. Stick around and check it out. So the next time you see something that could be a stress signal, don't jump to conclusions. Consider it in context, and that will help you understand your dog a lot more effectively.